My name is Jessica, and I'm 29 years old. 3 weeks ago, I thought I had the perfect marriage. My husband David and I had been together for 6 years, married for 3, and I genuinely believed we were soulmates. We had this beautiful routine where every Tuesday night we would order takeout and watch our favorite reality show together on the couch. It was our sacred time, no phones, no distractions, just us laughing at the drama unfolding on screen. Last Tuesday started exactly the same way. I had no idea that by the end of the night, my entire world would crumble in the most public and humiliating way imaginable. If you've ever wondered how quickly your life can change in a single moment, stick around because this story will show you just how devastating that moment can be. Before we dive into what happened that night, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you've ever had your trust completely shattered. And subscribe if you want to hear more real stories about surviving life's most brutal surprises. I promise you, this story has twists you won't see coming. Let me paint you a picture of what my life looked like before everything fell apart. David worked as a marketing executive at a mid-sized firm downtown, and I was a freelance graphic designer working mostly from our apartment. We lived in this cozy 2-bedroom place with exposed brick walls and big windows that let in the most beautiful morning light. Every morning, David would make coffee for both of us before heading to work, and I would kiss him goodbye at the door like we were starring in our own romantic movie. Our relationship had always felt effortless. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party, and from the moment we started talking, everything just clicked. He had this way of making me laugh until my sides hurt, and I loved how passionate he got when talking about his work or his dreams for our future together. When he proposed 2 years into our relationship, it felt like the natural next step in what I thought would be our forever story. The wedding was everything I had dreamed of. Small, intimate, with just our closest family and friends. David cried when I walked down the aisle, and during our first dance, he whispered in my ear that he couldn't wait to spend the rest of his life making me happy. Looking back now, I wonder if those tears were real or if he was already living a double life even then. But here's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't usually announce itself with dramatic music and obvious red flags. It creeps in quietly, disguised as normal life, while you're busy believing in the love story you think you're living. For the past few months, David had been working late more often. He said his company was going through a major restructuring, and he needed to prove himself to keep his position. I supported him completely, bringing him dinner at the office sometimes, giving him space to focus on his career. When he started going on more business trips, I missed him terribly, but understood that success required sacrifice. There were tiny moments that felt off, but I explained them away because that's what you do when you trust someone completely. Like how he started keeping his phone face down during dinner, or how he would step outside to take certain calls. When I asked about it, he would say it was work stuff that was too boring to explain, and I believed him because I wanted to believe him. The Tuesday that changed everything started like any other. I spent the day working on a logo design for a local restaurant while David was at the office. Around 5 in the evening, he texted me saying he would be home by 7 with Chinese food from our favorite place. I remember feeling excited about our weekly tradition, maybe even a little smug about how solid our relationship was compared to the couples we watched fight on television every week. David came home right on time, armed with containers of lo mein and orange chicken, plus that smile that had made me fall in love with him years earlier. We settled onto our sectional sofa, him on the left side where he always sat, me curled up next to him with my legs tucked under me. The show we watched was one of those dating reality programs where contestants live in a house together, forming relationships and alliances while cameras capture every moment of drama. We were about 20 minutes into the episode when something on the screen made my blood run cold. The show was doing one of those montage segments where they show highlights from previous episodes, and there in the background of a group date scene was a face I recognized immediately. My husband's face. At first, I thought I was seeing things. Maybe it was someone who just looked like David, or maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. But as the camera lingered on the group for a few more seconds, there was no denying it. That was definitely my husband, sitting at a restaurant table, laughing and holding hands with a beautiful blonde woman I had never seen before in my life. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I grabbed the remote and rewound the scene, watching it again in slow motion. David noticed me rewinding and asked what I was looking for, his voice casual and unbothered. I couldn't speak. I just pointed at the screen and watched his face transform from confusion to recognition to pure terror. The woman he was with looked nothing like me. Where I had dark hair and pale skin, she was sun-kissed and golden, with the kind of effortless beauty that belongs in magazines. But what destroyed me wasn't how she looked. It was how happy David looked sitting next to her. He had this expression of pure joy and contentment that I realized I hadn't seen directed at me in months. The show cut to a talking head segment where they interviewed some of the contestants, and there she was again. Her name appeared on the screen, Brittany, 26, from Miami. She was talking about how excited she was to find love and how she had recently gotten out of a long-term relationship that wasn't working out. My long-term relationship, my marriage. David started talking very quickly, his words tumbling over each other as he tried to explain. He said it wasn't what it looked like, that it was a work thing, that he could explain everything if I would just give him a chance. But I was barely listening because my mind was racing, connecting dots I had been too trusting to see before. All those late nights at work, all those business trips, the phone calls he took in private. He hadn't been working overtime to secure his job. He had been auditioning for reality television shows and apparently succeeding well enough to make it onto one of the most popular dating programs on cable. The most devastating part wasn't just that he had cheated. It was that he had cheated so publicly, so dramatically, that millions of people across the country had watched him fall in love with someone else, while I sat at home like a fool, supporting what I thought was his career ambition. As the episode continued, I watched my husband navigate challenges and group dates, flirting shamelessly with multiple women while I had been home planning what I thought was our future together. Every laugh, every touch, every romantic gesture I witnessed felt like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. But what happened next was something I never could have prepared for, and it would make this betrayal infinitely worse than anything I had discovered so far. The show switched to a segment where they announced the next episode's preview, and my stomach dropped even further when I saw what was coming. There was David, down on one knee in what looked like a beautiful beachside setting, holding a ring box while Brittany covered her mouth in shock. The preview voiceover dramatically announced that next week's episode would feature the season's first proposal, and the camera zoomed in on David's face as he mouthed the words, "Will you marry me?" I felt like I was having an out-of-body experience. This man, who was sitting right next to me on our couch in our apartment, wearing the wedding ring I had placed on his finger 3 years ago, had proposed to another woman on national television. And judging by the preview, she had said yes. The Chinese food containers sat forgotten on our coffee table, growing cold while I stared at the television screen in complete disbelief. David had gone silent, no longer trying to explain or make excuses. He just sat there looking pale and caught, like a deer in headlights. I finally found my voice and asked him when this was filmed. He mumbled something about it being a few months ago, right around the time he had told me about that week-long business conference in California. The conference that apparently never existed. Instead, he had been living in a mansion with a dozen other people, dating multiple women simultaneously while cameras documented every moment. But the betrayal went even deeper than I initially realized. As I sat there processing what I had just witnessed, I started remembering conversations we had during that time period. How he had come home from his supposed business trip talking about missing me and being grateful for what we had. How he had been extra affectionate for weeks afterward, bringing me flowers and planning romantic date nights. I had thought he was just appreciating our relationship more after being away, but now I understood he had been managing his guilt. The worst part was realizing that other people in my life probably already knew. Reality shows film months before they air, which meant David's friends, his coworkers, maybe even some of our mutual friends, had been keeping this secret while I continued living in blissful ignorance. I thought about all the recent social gatherings where conversations had seemed to stop when I entered the room, all the weird looks I had gotten from people who suddenly made sense. My phone started buzzing with text messages. Apparently, I wasn't the only one watching the show that night. Friends and family members who had recognized David were reaching out, some asking if I was okay, others clearly fishing for gossip. The humiliation was spreading in real time as people across the country witnessed my husband's betrayal along with me. David finally tried to defend himself, claiming that going on the show had been a mistake, that he had gotten caught up in the experience, but never meant for it to go as far as it did. He insisted that he loved me, and that what I saw on television wasn't real, just manufactured drama for entertainment purposes. But his words felt hollow when I was literally watching him propose to another woman on my television screen. I asked him if he was still in contact with Brittany, and the pause before his answer told me everything I needed to know. He admitted they had been texting since filming wrapped, but claimed it was just friendly conversation, nothing romantic. When I demanded to see his phone, he hesitated just long enough to make it clear that whatever I would find there would only make things worse. The episode continued playing in the background, and I watched in horrified fascination as David navigated rose ceremonies and elimination rounds. The cameras captured intimate moments I had never been allowed to see. Vulnerable conversations where he opened up about his fears and dreams in ways he rarely did with me anymore. It was like watching a stranger who happened to look exactly like my husband. What made it even more surreal was that the show had clearly edited him to be one of the romantic leads. He wasn't portrayed as a villain or a player, but as a genuine guy looking for love. The producers had crafted a narrative around his journey that painted him as someone worthy of viewers' investment and support. Meanwhile, I was sitting at home realizing that the man I had married was capable of compartmentalizing his life in ways I never could have imagined. As the episode reached its climax with another dramatic rose ceremony, I found myself analyzing every gesture and expression, looking for signs of the David I thought I knew. But this television version of my husband seemed more confident, more charismatic, more alive than the man who had been coming home to me every night. It was as if the cameras had captured a version of him that he had been hiding from me for months, maybe even years. The episode ended with a preview for the reunion special, scheduled to air in 2 weeks. The preview showed all the contestants gathered together to discuss what had happened since filming ended, including updates on current relationships. There was a brief shot of David looking uncomfortable as the host asked him about his relationship status, but the preview cut away before revealing his answer. I turned off the television and sat in the silence of our apartment, which suddenly felt like a crime scene. Every shared memory, every inside joke, every moment of intimacy we had experienced now felt contaminated by his deception. The life we had built together had been nothing more than his backup plan while he pursued something more exciting on national television. David attempted to salvage the situation by suggesting we could work through this together, go to counseling, find a way to rebuild trust. But as I looked at him sitting there in the dim light of our living room, still wearing his wedding ring while I had just watched him propose to someone else, I realized there was no coming back from this level of betrayal. The reality of what I was facing began to sink in as I stared at the man I thought I knew better than anyone. This wasn't just about infidelity or even emotional betrayal. David had literally auditioned for a show designed to help people find love while married to me. He had filled out applications, gone through interviews, submitted photos, and convinced producers that he was single and ready to find his soulmate. I started asking questions that I wasn't sure I wanted answers to. How long had he been planning this? Had he applied to other dating shows? Were there other women I didn't know about? Each question seemed to reveal another layer of deception that made me question everything about our relationship. David's explanations became increasingly desperate as he realized the magnitude of what had been exposed. He claimed that he had applied to the show during a rough patch in our marriage, when we had been fighting more than usual about his work schedule and my desire to start trying for children. According to him, he never expected to actually get selected. And when he did, he convinced himself it would just be a fun experience that wouldn't mean anything. But I remembered that rough patch he was referring to. It had lasted maybe 2 weeks, and I thought we had worked through it like couples do. Apparently, while I was making an effort to communicate better and strengthen our relationship, he was filling out dating show applications and dreaming of escape. The lies kept unraveling as we talked. The business conference in California, where he claimed to have learned new marketing strategies, that was actually the show's filming location. The work stress he had been dealing with afterward, that was him trying to manage his double life. The extra affection and romantic gestures when he returned, classic guilty husband behavior. What made it worse was remembering how I had bragged to my friends about how attentive David had been during that period. I had actually used his post-show behavior as evidence of how strong our marriage was, telling people that his business trip had reminded him of what was important. The irony was devastating. My phone continued buzzing throughout our conversation. Word was spreading quickly through our social circle. Some messages were supportive, asking if I was okay or offering to come over. Others were clearly from people who wanted front row seats to the drama. A few were from acquaintances I barely knew, people who had apparently recognized David on the show and felt compelled to reach out. The most painful message came from my sister Sarah, who lived across the country. She had been watching the show with her roommates when David appeared on screen. Her text was gentle but direct. "Jessica, please call me when you can. I just saw something on TV that I think you need to know about." The timestamp showed she had sent it 15 minutes before I had discovered the truth myself. I realized that this betrayal wasn't just between David and me anymore. Our private relationship had become public entertainment, and now friends, family members, and complete strangers were all witnesses to the destruction of my marriage. The humiliation felt endless and inescapable. David suggested we turn off our phones and focus on talking through the situation privately, but I couldn't stop reading the messages. Each notification felt like another person discovering my husband's betrayal, another witness to my complete obliviousness. Some people were kind and supportive, but others seemed almost excited by the drama, treating our marriage like it was just another episode of reality television. As we continued talking, David revealed more details that made the situation even worse. The show had provided relationship coaching and date planning services that he had never offered me in our actual marriage. He had gone on elaborate helicopter rides, private beach dinners, and adventure dates that cost more than our monthly rent. Meanwhile, our idea of a romantic evening was ordering pizza and watching Netflix. I asked him about the other women on the show, and he insisted that while he had connections with several contestants, Brittany was the only one he had developed real feelings for. This was supposed to make me feel better somehow, as if being emotionally faithful to one other woman while married to me was an acceptable compromise. The conversation kept circling back to his proposal to Brittany, which was scheduled to air the following week. David swore that he had been caught up in the moment, that the show's environment was designed to accelerate emotions and create dramatic moments. He claimed that if he could take it back, he would. But the damage was already done. Millions of viewers would watch him propose to another woman while wearing the wedding ring I had given him. I found myself wondering about Brittany and whether she knew about me. Had David told her he was married, or had he maintained his single status throughout their entire relationship? The show's background checks were notoriously thorough. So either the producers knew about me and didn't care, or David had been skilled enough at hiding our marriage to fool professional investigators. The thought of this beautiful young woman believing she had found love with my husband while I was completely unaware of her existence made me feel sick. She was probably at home right now, excitedly waiting for next week's episode to air, planning watch parties with friends and family to see the man she thought loved her propose on national television. David's phone started ringing repeatedly, and when he finally answered one of the calls, I could hear a frantic male voice on the other end. It was his agent, apparently, someone I had never heard of before tonight. From David's side of the conversation, it became clear that the show's producers were in damage control mode, trying to figure out how to handle the situation now that his marriage had been exposed. After he hung up, David explained that the show had been contacted by several viewers who had recognized him and were asking questions about his relationship status. The network was considering how to address the situation, possibly adding a disclaimer to future episodes, or even removing his proposal segment entirely. But the damage was already done. Social media was buzzing with speculation about David's marital status, and amateur internet detectives were already digging up information about our wedding and relationship. Someone had found our marriage certificate online and posted screenshots, along with photos from our wedding that they had discovered on mutual friends' social media accounts. I realized that our private life was about to become very public very quickly. The show had millions of devoted fans who treated contestants like celebrities, analyzing every moment and following their lives long after filming ended. David had inadvertently made me part of that world without my consent, and there was no way to go back. The most surreal part was that somewhere in the country, Brittany was probably having her own devastating realization. If she truly cared about David, discovering that he was married would be crushing for her too. We were both victims of his deception, just in different ways. As the night wore on, I found myself thinking about all the small moments that now made perfect sense. How David had been more interested in his appearance lately, working out more and buying new clothes. How he had started using different cologne and gotten a more stylish haircut. How he had been more secretive about his weekend activities, claiming he was networking or exploring new hobbies. Even our sex life had changed during that period, though I had attributed it to stress from work. Now I wondered if he had been comparing me to the women he was meeting on the show, or if his physical intimacy with me had felt like cheating on them rather than the other way around. The psychological manipulation required to maintain such an elaborate lie was staggering. David had been living two completely different lives, presenting himself as a devoted husband to me, while simultaneously pursuing a very public romance with someone else. The level of compartmentalization required suggested a capacity for deception that I had never suspected. I started questioning my own judgment and intuition. How had I missed something this significant? Were there signs I had ignored or explained away? Had I been so comfortable in our relationship that I had stopped paying attention to changes in his behavior? The self-doubt was almost as painful as the betrayal itself. David kept apologizing and asking what he could do to fix things. But I was beginning to understand that some betrayals are too complete to repair. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or a single mistake. It was a calculated deception that had been months in the planning and execution. The man sitting next to me on our couch was someone I no longer recognized, and I was starting to realize that the David I thought I had married might never have existed at all. He had been performing the role of devoted husband while secretly auditioning for the role of reality television bachelor. As I sat there surrounded by the remnants of our Chinese takeout and the life we had built together, I knew that everything was about to change in ways I couldn't even begin to imagine. The silence in our apartment was deafening after David finally stopped trying to justify the unjustifiable. I sat there staring at the blank television screen, processing the fact that my husband had just proposed to another woman on national television while I had been home planning our anniversary dinner for next month. The irony was so twisted, it felt like something out of a dark comedy, except I was living it and nothing about it was funny. I finally broke the silence by asking David the question that had been eating at me since the moment I saw him on that screen. When exactly had he stopped loving me? He immediately protested that he had never stopped loving me, that what happened on the show was separate from our marriage. But his words sounded hollow even to him. You don't propose to someone else while wearing another woman's wedding ring if love is still alive in your heart. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that David's betrayal went beyond simple infidelity. He had systematically erased me from his life in order to participate in this show. He had to convince producers, contestants, and viewers that he was completely single and available. That meant creating an entire fictional version of himself where I simply didn't exist. I asked him what he had told the show's producers about his living situation, since we shared an apartment with both our names on the lease. David admitted that he had claimed to live alone, using his friend Marcus's address as his official residence during the application process. Marcus, who had been in our wedding and had eaten dinner at our table dozens of times, had been complicit in helping David erase me from his story. The betrayal kept expanding like ripples in a pond. How many people had known about this? How many of our mutual friends had been keeping this secret while I continued posting happy couple photos on social media and talking about our future plans? I felt like the protagonist in some cruel psychological thriller where everyone around me was in on a conspiracy I knew nothing about. David's phone buzzed with another call from his agent, and this time I could hear more of the conversation. The network was apparently scrambling to address the situation before next week's episode aired. There was talk of editing out certain segments, adding disclaimers, or even pulling David's proposal entirely. But they were also discussing the possibility of turning this scandal into a storyline, potentially bringing me onto the reunion special as a shocking revelation. The thought of becoming part of their entertainment spectacle made me physically nauseous. These people were discussing my marriage like it was a plot twist in their show, weighing the dramatic value of my pain against potential ratings boosts. I had become collateral damage in David's quest for 15 minutes of fame. I walked to our bedroom and started pulling his clothes out of the dresser, throwing them into garbage bags with shaking hands. David followed me, pleading with me to slow down and talk through our options rationally. But there were no options to discuss. He had made his choice when he filled out that application, and then again when he got on that plane to film the show. And again, every single day, he chose to continue lying to my face. As I emptied his drawers, I found things that now took on sinister new meaning. A receipt for expensive cologne I had never smelled on him. A business card for a personal trainer I had never heard him mention. A notebook with what looked like talking points about his ideal relationship and future goals, none of which mentioned being married or having a wife who already shared his life. The notebook was particularly devastating because it contained David's genuine thoughts about what he wanted in a partner. He had written about wanting someone spontaneous and adventurous, someone who would push him out of his comfort zone and challenge him to grow. As I read his words, I realized he was describing everything I apparently wasn't in his eyes. I had thought we were happy with our quiet routine, our Tuesday night traditions, our comfortable life together. But David had apparently been suffocating in our relationship, dreaming of something more exciting, while I remained blissfully unaware of his dissatisfaction. The man who kissed me goodbye every morning had been planning his escape for months. My phone rang, and I saw my best friend Chloe's name on the screen. She had obviously seen the show or heard about it from someone else. When I answered, she immediately started crying, apologizing for not calling sooner and asking if I was okay. Through her tears, she admitted that she had suspected something was wrong for weeks, but hadn't known how to bring it up. Chloe had noticed changes in David's behavior during girls' nights when he would pick me up. He seemed distracted and kept checking his phone, and once she had seen him smile at a text message in a way that seemed too intimate for a work conversation. She had convinced herself she was being paranoid, but now everything made sense. Even my best friend had been picking up on signals that David was emotionally involved with someone else, while I had been completely oblivious. The realization that I had been the last person to know about my own husband's affair was humiliating beyond words. As I continued packing David's belongings, he kept trying to minimize what had happened. He insisted that the show environment wasn't real, that the emotions were manufactured by producers who manipulated contestants into dramatic moments. He claimed that his proposal to Brittany had been scripted, and that he had never actually intended to follow through with marrying her. That night changed everything for me. I filed for divorce the next morning, and by the time David's proposal episode aired, I was already staying at my sister's house across the country. The internet exploded when viewers put together the pieces about his marriage, and suddenly I was getting interview requests from tabloids and morning shows wanting to hear my side of the story. I chose silence instead. Let David deal with the public humiliation he had created for himself. Brittany reached out to me through social media, and we actually ended up talking for hours about how completely we had both been deceived. She was heartbroken too, having genuinely believed she had found her soulmate, only to discover she had been part of someone else's elaborate lie. The hardest part wasn't losing David. It was losing my faith in my own judgment. How do you trust yourself to recognize love again when you lived with someone for years without seeing who they really were? But here's what I learned from having my life destroyed on national television. Sometimes the most devastating moments reveal truths that needed to come to light. David did me a favor by showing me exactly who he was, before I wasted any more years on someone who saw our marriage as a consolation prize. I deserved better than being someone's backup plan, and it took catching him on live television to finally see that clearly. 6 months later, I'm rebuilding my life in a new city with a new job and new friends who knew nothing about reality TV drama. I still don't watch dating shows, but I'm learning to trust my instincts again. The woman who was blindsided by her husband's betrayal is stronger now, and she's not settling for anything less than genuine love. If your relationship feels too good to be true, pay attention to that feeling. Trust your gut when something seems off, even if you can't put your finger on what it is. And remember that anyone who truly loves you would never put you in a position where you have to discover their betrayal alongside millions of strangers. Sometimes, the most painful wake-up calls are exactly what we need to save ourselves from wasting our lives on people who don't deserve us. I may have lost my marriage on live television, but I found my self-respect, and that trade was worth it. Have you ever discovered something about someone close to you that completely changed how you saw them? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more real stories about surviving life's biggest betrayals. Sometimes sharing our pain helps others avoid the same mistakes. Thanks for listening to my story, and remember that your worth isn't determined by someone else's ability to see it. The right person will never make you question whether you're enough.